The end of the First Sino-Japanese War saw a modernized Japan defeat its centuries-old continental rival. While it'd be another decade before European powers really took notice and meaning of this development, its effects were felt locally for over a generation to come. One region where this class of rivalries had the largest impact wasn't in China itself per se, but in one of its regions specifically, the island of Taiwan. The island of Taiwan was ceded to the Japanese following the 1894 treaty, but the local populace and Qing royalists refused to give in. Instead, they would fight for their own independence, and this bout of independence would not only establish one of the first republics in Asia, but it would also produce the largest battle ever fought on Taiwanese soil. It's a tale largely forgotten, and it should be remembered. So in today's episode, we will be looking at the 1895 Japanese invasion of Taiwan. Taiwan came under Qing control back in 1683, after a brutal campaign by Qing officials which beat back the multitude of indigenous tribes, indigenous kingdoms, and European colonies that had existed on the island. During the 200-year reign, constant rebellions by the native peoples plagued the island, and the frequency of rebellions, riots, and civil strife in Taiwan would be noted by a Chinese official as every 3 years an uprising, every 5 years a rebellion. Northern Taiwan and the Penghu Islands would see occupation during the European wars waged against the Qing Empire. During the 1884 Sino-French War, the French had occupied northern Taiwan, largely based out of the city of Keelung, and occupied the Pescadores island chain, which was originally intended to be used as a stepping stone for an invasion of southern China, and one more nation would later use the same rationale for their attempted annexation. By the 1890s, Japan had gone from a largely isolated nation to a major modern powerhouse, and they set their sights on the Asian mainland. Korea would be their first target, and the Japanese would go to war with China in 1894 over the land, which resulted in a crushing defeat for the weakening Chinese Empire. The Japanese also took steps to ensure that Taiwan would be ceded to Japan under the eventual peace treaty, with them occupying the Pescadore Islands with little resistance, which enforced their claim to both them and Taiwan in the ensuing peace. The Treaty of Shimonoseki, which ended the First Sino-Japanese War, had a clause that gave these lands to the Japanese, even if the latter wasn't under direct occupation. This clause was accepted by the Qing government, yet a number of nobles on the island, headed by Zhu Jianfei, decided to resist this attempted annexation by declaring their own independence. The Republic of Formosa would be proclaimed on May the 23rd of 1895, with the former Governor-General Tang Jin acting as president. They attempted to court international support, and while the Republic had some support from aspects in the French government, it ultimately led to nothing. Nor did the Chinese authorities in Peking seek to engage in the Republic, even if a handful of local warlords did what they could in supporting them. The new nation, with some support from Chinese warlords, worked fast to build up its military force for the eventual Japanese invasion that they knew would soon come. On the 29th of May, 7,000 Japanese Imperial Guard troops under the command of Prince Terashawa Yoshida made a landing at the small village of Howdy, several miles to the east of Keelung, and they marched overland in an attempt to capture the city. The first major action would take place 5 days later at Suhan, which routed the Chinese forces that were guarding the countryside. Keelung, the city that held out against the French for months, fell the next day with minimal Japanese losses. The morale of these Chinese troops were utterly gone, and most of them merely wanted to return home. With the fall of Keelung, the government of the Republic quickly fled, with most returning to the Chinese mainland by June the 6th. They would leave the new Republic with no ordered leadership, and they leave the countrymen to fend off the invaders alone. Their flight from the capital of Taipei resulted in utter chaos, with soldiers threatening to open fire upon the ship that the government officials were on, unless they paid a high bribe to let them pass. The heavily defended forts on the island that were recently built were left abandoned by the Qing garrison, and the Japanese managed to capture the city of Taipei on June the 8th without needing to fire a single shot. It was expected that the capture of the capital city would end the war, but hopes for an early end to the war proved to be premature. By the end of June, it was clear that all the island's main towns would have to be occupied before opposition to the invasion collapsed. Popular resistance to the Japanese would gradually grow along the countryside following the fall of Taipei, and on June the 26th, the presidency of the Republic was assumed by Liu Yangfu in Tainan. This gesture, which eventually transferred the Republic's capital from Taipei to Tainan, prolonged the new nation's life for another 5 months. So far, the Japanese had been fighting Qing regular troops, most of whom wanted merely to leave the soil of Taiwan and return to mainland China as soon as possible. They had little stomach for fighting the Japanese, and they made no attempt to defeat them when they did fight. Now, however, locally recruited Formosan troops began to take the lead in fighting against the Japanese, and they would give stubborn resistance and even turn back the Japanese across the island, with guerrilla bands in the rear of the Japanese lines plaguing supply and travel. Any small group of soldiers or underprotected supply caravans would be ambushed and massacred. The retaliation by the invaders would be that of burning down whole villages and killing the inhabitants, but that only largely hardened the resolve of the guerrilla fighters. The next major Japanese objective on the route south was the walled city of Chainhua. The Formosans had massed their forces there to fight a defensive battle, and Liu Yangfu, the commander of the militia forces, had reinforced the militia with a number of elite Black Flag units from his southern army. The capture of Chainhua was a formidable proposition for the Japanese, as the heights of Bagushen to the north of the city were fortified and defended by strong artillery positions. During the night of August the 26th, the Japanese crossed the Doteki River, and at dawn, their columns would make a surprise attack on the artillery batteries and Chainhua, resulting in the Battle of Bagushan, the largest battle to take place on Taiwanese soil, and it would be the decisive engagement of the invasion. The Formosan loss here doomed the Republic to an early defeat, and while the Japanese were unable to advance after this due to a major outbreak of malaria, the militia units didn't have the ability to win pitched battles after this conflict, and they largely focused on doing as much damage as possible through guerrilla fighting. The next major battle occurred at Chiayi on October the 9th, and it would be the last major pitched battle of the campaign. 3,000 Formosan militia units were backed by 600 Black Flag units, and they were armed with artillery and machine guns. After preliminary bombardment, the Japanese would scale the walls and they broke into the city, scattering the defenders while only taking a handful of casualties. The following day, discouraged by the news of the fall of Chiayi, Liu Yangfu made an offer of conditional surrender to the Japanese. He asked that no Formosan should be punished for having taken up arms against them, and that all Chinese soldiers still in Taiwan would be reprimanded to the mainland. When asked to board a ship to discuss peace terms, Yangfu instead refused, and under disguise he left for the mainland himself on a British steamer. The Japanese managed to intercept the steamer, and they ended up arresting Yangfu, plus a number of his cabinet, albeit not knowing who he was. They were later released on the mainland after a British complaint on the same day that the capital of the Formosan Republic would fall to the Japanese. And with the fall of Tainan, it ended all serious resistance to the invasion, and it put in an era of under 50 years of Japanese rule. Yet this wouldn't be the end of unrest on the island, and the Taiwanese people would continue to resist the Japanese until they were forced to give up the island after World War II. But that is a topic for another time.